Okay, so I wanted to do this video just to talk about a few things. We're trying to add more content to our website and just give more resources for people. And I had been wanting to do one of these videos. Dexter Field, he spoke about a lot. I don't think this one will be recorded and we can post it on the website. We're going to talk about a few things. Let me pull up the poster just to make sure I don't miss anything. We're going to talk about tabletop, American breeding, line breeding, selecting for the right birds, calling, hatching and artificial insemination, and maybe something else that might come up. And I guess at any point, if anybody has a question, just feel free to chime in. But if y'all don't mind, if y'all could, I think I can do that. Yeah, okay. I went ahead and muted you guys just so that I can focus on reading. So first we'll start out with, let me get back here. We'll start out with tabletop. So the first one is, what is tabletop? Tabletop is a form of showing for the Serama chicken that's unique to just the Seramas. Posted on a table. No other chickens show like that. That's what makes the breed unique, is their form of showing. They show them on tables in Malaysia. Where can I find or participate in a tabletop show? We have a lot of groups on Facebook, SCNA groups that we post our shows on. There's district groups for each different district. There's a SCNA tabletop show group on Facebook that you can find shows. If you haven't joined the SCNA, you can go to scnaonline.org and join, and you can see which district you're in and then find the link for it on Facebook. We have an events page on the SCNA website. How can you prepare your birds and train them for tabletop showing? I'll start with just saying that all birds are going to be different with their temperament. Some birds, you don't have to work with them at all, and they'll be perfect, just like this bird. Linder said you didn't work with this bird at all, did you? He didn't work with this bird at all, and this bird, for the past few minutes, has just been posing and standing on this table. He might get tired after a while, but birds all have different temperaments, so some birds will be great on the table without having to work the birds at all. Some birds won't, but just to start out, I would say that it's important to get your birds comfortable with you and handling them and get them used to you. This bird, I've never handled this bird before, and he's been fine with me handling him, but sometimes birds will get used to their handlers and they'll be comfortable with them, maybe not with other people. But I just say get your birds used to being handled, get them used to being touched and moved out of their cage, and get them on the table and get them used to being on the table. And another thing is exposure to new environments. Take your table and move it around your yard or move it into different buildings and get your bird used to being comfortable on the table. And what will happen is eventually they'll associate the table with safety, even in a different environment. So they'll be comfortable enough to pose and perform in different environments when they see the table. And roosters in general are very dominant and they just want to show off. And these Seramas particularly are like that. So when they see a table, they're going to want to get on it, flap and pose and show that they own that table. Training cages are an option. You can make them out of simple wire. Do you have any training cages? Linda's going to grab a training cage. Training cages are used just to confine the birds to an environment and put them right on the cage. This is an example of one right here. And you can set the bird right in the training cage and just leave them in the training cage. Linder has some material on the outside which encourages the birds to stand up and look out and pose. That's one form of getting them used to staying on the table. One thing that I've learned is not to let the birds get comfortable with flying off the table. So if a bird is continuously flying off the table, sure, put them back on the table. But when I'm working with my birds, as soon as they fly off that table, I would usually just put them right back in their pen because I don't want them to get used to flying off the table, because at a show, they'll know that that's an option, and I want them to think that they have to stay on the table. So treats on a table, should you do that? Should you not do it? I think that it's okay when you're starting off to put some scratch on the table or even mealworms to get the birds to stay on the table initially. I advise against it personally being used as a form of training. Some people use the mealworm to make them stand up on the table, and what that does is it causes an unnatural pose. The birds are so used to doing that. When judging, like if I judge a bird that's been trained to look up at a mealworm, it's going to stand upright, but it throws the proportion of the bird off. Posing is not going to be natural, and I don't want to see that as a judge. I want to see the bird naturally posing. So it almost makes for a fake pose, in my opinion, and I'd rather see what the bird can do on its own. So at the end, I wrote time and repetition. It's just going to take time. It's going to take you repeatedly putting your bird on the table, getting them used to staying on the table, just becoming comfortable with that environment. Read Scott Massengo's question from Facebook. This was just a breakdown of tiers. He asked the question, in tabletop tier 2 and above, what percent of the score is on performance and what percent is on type?
All right, here you go.
I believe the way it's written right now is 50% performance and 50% type on the following tiers once they've been scored initially. But how do I get my bird to know I want him or her to pull his head back and maintain that pose for an allotted time? That's something that's natural. Like I mentioned with the mealworm training, I've seen people successfully get their birds to pose, which means just holding themselves upright. But personally, I don't think that that allows the bird to have a natural pose, and I would recommend against it. I would recommend just breeding birds that can pose more because that's in their genetics, and you can't get say just a yard bird to pose and look like a Serama. Serama has to look like a Serama. So that'll be my answer to that question. So let's see. How about clipping? Someone asked clipping. I guess this. Do you mean trimming the feathers, Frank? I'll unmute you. Frank, I'm gonna assume you meant how about clipping, meaning trimming the feathers?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Okay. For IM, we have a written description for where it's allowed to trim on our SCNA standard for the IMs. It's on our website. And just referencing off of my mind, I believe that you're allowed to trim. Just grab this bird. You're allowed to trim legs and the fluff, and I think that's all you're allowed to trim for our standards. So that'd just be along the legs and the fluff under the vent.
When you're judging, does that make a difference in your opinion?
It can, because this bird, it's not necessarily a extremely loose feathered bird, but the more loose feathered birds, it could hide leg length. It could disproportionate the bird a little bit. So what you're doing whenever you're removing this fluff, I have a picture on my Facebook. But what it does is it kind of makes your eye focus on the front half of the bird more so than the back half when you remove all that extra fluff. So it can help bring more focus to the chest and the front part of the bird. So with IMs, I would do it. If I was showing IMs, I would do it cleanly and according to the standard. But I do think that it would help make the bird look a little bit more front heavy in a good way, but I think it would have to be done right, and maybe other judges might have a different opinion, but that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Covering the bottom of the training cage is a great tip. Makes them stand higher, but still looking ahead. Right. Not looking up, just making them stand up. Doesn't matter if they're clipped or not in Malaysian style. Just answered that. How much time should you spend for each session on the bird? Can you explain what you mean by that? TG296.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want them to get frustrated. So what's an average amount of time? 10 minutes, 30 minutes? Just so that you're just not spending way too much time and they get frustrated and won't do anything.
I think it depends on the bird and how comfortable they are. If the bird's not comfortable on the table, I'd spend a lot of time. I'd make the bird stay on the table as much time as I had until the bird was almost falling asleep on the table. I'd make sure that the bird got comfortable staying on the table. Using a training cage for a bird like that would be great. If the bird is a bird that's used to the table, I wouldn't want to get them worn out on the table, so I'd maybe put them on, let them perform for a second, and then put them back in their cage. I think you definitely reach a point where there's not much more you can do, and the birds, they can get worn out from the table. So I'd say maybe just a few minutes if the bird's fully trained.
Okay, well, that's good to know because I have had a couple that are not comfortable and they just want to fly off all the time. And I keep putting them back and I'm thinking, am I making them more frustrated by doing that? But it sounds like it's breaking them of doing that. So maybe that is what we need to do. And I do have a cage.
Yeah,
so.
I think that would be good. I think that would be good just to put them in a cage and get them used to the table to the point that they're understanding when they get on the table, they're not leaving until you remove them from the table. But once they're broken of that, I guess almost like riding a horse. You know, once they're broken of that, they're broken of it for the most part.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. How long do the birds spend on the table when they're shown? So whenever you put a bird on the table at a show, the judge is going to look at them for 90 seconds, I believe. And they're only judged for what happens in those 90 seconds. So if the judge finishes judging, hands the scorecard, and then the bird just hits a pose or starts performing and wakes up, it's not considered. If the bird does something negative after that point, it's not considered. It's just between the 90-second bracket that the judge is going to consider the bird. Okay. All right. So was there any more questions on tabletop? I think I covered everyone in the chat. And I don't see any on Facebook. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'm going to just handle this bird for a second and then I'll move on to American. So I'll just talk about this bird for a second. Linder said that he hasn't handled this bird much at all, but when this bird hits the table, he's comfortable, he's not flying off. I don't know how long this meeting's been going on, but the bird was on a few minutes before and he's still posing and comfortable. That's a great thing to breed in your birds. It's a great thing to hold on to. I have found that genetics, sometimes some birds and some lines will particularly be more likely to fly off the table or just be crazy. And I definitely recommend keeping birds that'll tend to just stay on the table. And again, going back to posing, this bird has posed the whole time he's been on the table, and that's because Linder selects his birds to look how they're supposed to look. So I'll wrap this guy up. He's ready to be off the table. And do you want to grab an American? Yeah. A proper colored one? She won third place in the Cajun Classic. Third place. So this is an exchequer female. She won third place, which was second runner-up at the last Cajun Classic. She did really good in cage, and then she moved on to tabletop in the last round, which is something that's unique to the Cajun Classic. We bring back every tier for the final tier. So she was allowed to compete again after she had already won Champion American. So what is an American Serama? An American Serama is a Serama that it fits an approved color description that has been approved and accepted by the ABA or the APA. So the current colors that we have approved by the ABA are exchequer, white, and black. And then blue and splash are up for acceptance this May. It's in May. I think it's in May. So the blue and splash are up for acceptance then. And if they get accepted, they'd also be accepted for the ABA. The APA, which is the American Poultry Association, has only accepted the whites. So that is what an American Serama is. As far as type goes, American Serama type expectation is the same exact standard type as traditional, and that's a terminology that's used by SCNA. It's the same exact body type, except they fit a color description. So, where can you find American Serama shows? Before I hit that, while I'm on color, I'm gonna just go over this bird just to show a proper colored exchequer if it does show up well enough. Okay. For a proper colored exchequer, they're gonna be black and white. I'm not 100% sure. 100% sure. Maybe someone can chime in. I think it may be 60-40. White being the 40, 60 being the black, or if it's even specified. But this is a very proportionate color exchequer. She looks great. She's done well in cage. As far as the shanks, it's a yellow base shank with black on the top. And I believe it can be splotched. Doesn't matter the pattern. Lobes need to be red for all American Serama. So she's a good example of American Serama. Not sure if she'll stand up. She's probably ready for bed. So where can you find American Serama shows? PoultryCentral.com is a great place to find shows. They reach out to different clubs and organizations. They've reached out to SCNA this year. So you can go to PoultryCentral.com and you can find shows throughout the country. ABA, American Bantam Association, their website is bantamclub.com. They have shows listed on there. So American Serama can be shown if they meet the color standard at any ABA sanctioned show and compete. APA, American Poultry Association, their website is AmericanPoultryASSN.com. And again, only whites can be shown and compete at an APA show. I believe at both. I'm not too familiar with APA, but I know ABA you can show non-recognized variety. I'm sure you could with ABA. I'm sure you could with APA as well. But white Serama are the only ones that can actually compete at an APA show. So how can I prepare or train my American Serama for in-cage showing? Similar to tabletop, I would just recommend getting your Serama used to being handled, taking them out of the cage, holding them. So just getting them used to being handled. When you walk past the cage, they don't need to run. They need to be used to you moving around, used to you talking, used to you handling them. For my American Serama, I'd pull them in and out of the cage every time I passed the cage if I had time. Just handle them, get them used to being handled. Hey, Miss Joy. Hi. One thing that American Serama judges do, they'll use a stick to judge. So even get you a stick and poke your bird in the cage and get them used to being touched with a stick. I think the main thing for American Serama is just getting them used to being handled and evaluated more so than being on a table. So it's a bit easier, but they're dual purpose because they can show tabletop as well. So train them for both. What's the difference between mottled and exchequer? So an exchequer is going to have ideally a solid colored feather. Every feather should be solid or with splotching. Splotching is on the standard, I believe, if that is the exact wording, I'm not sure. But so see, this is a solid black feather. So an exchequer, ideally, most of their black feathers should just be solid black, and their white feathers should be solid white. A mottled, which she probably will have some mottled feathers on here. Got some right here. So a mottled feather is a dark feather that is V-tipped with white. So you can see that. So ideally for a mottled bird, you'd want every dark feather to be tipped with a V versus having a solid white feather. Linda has a good mottled back there, but we're not gonna go grab him. I think she's good. You want to take her? So I think that covers what I had written down for American. If y'all want to ask any more questions, y'all can ask them in the chat, or y'all can unmute and ask a question. I'll give a few.
David,
Yes.
The American class in cage, they would also have to be entered under SCCL, the single comb clean leg.
Yes,
There's
sir.
different varieties, so
Yes.
you'd have to put that in when you're entry form.
One thing with American is that we have I know I already mentioned it, but we have the blue and splash meet coming up. So if you breed blue and splash birds, get some birds ready and try to attend. It'll be in Ohio, I think. Ohio National. Yeah. So that's exciting. No questions? I see one question on American, so we will jump to that. American legs are all yellow. No. White Serama have all yellow legs. Black Serama have yellow base legs with black over the top. Exchequer Serama have yellow base legs with black over the top as well. Blue and splash are also yellow based, but blue has blue over the top, and then splash is more like a green over the top. Okay, so main points for breeding. I have a few things written down. I'll try to stick to script, but might go a little different places. First thing I have is line breeding, but I think I might hit something before I jump to that. When breeding your Serama, I guess when you start with Serama, it would be best to start with the best birds possible and study the standard and know what you're looking for. So starting off, you just want to get the best birds you can because it's going to save you time. You're going to be able to compete if you go to a show. You're going to be breeding something that you're going to be excited whenever you get offspring from them. And I think it's worth investing a few $100s into some really good birds versus spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars taking care of birds that you're not satisfied with. But you can find local people. A lot of times you might get a pair for free, you might get cheaper. But if you don't have anybody local and you have to spend a couple $100s to get some good birds, I'd definitely say go that route versus getting the cheapest you can find and then not being satisfied with them. Mm-hmm. What is line breeding? So line breeding is a concentration of genetics. So it's taking the genetics of that particular line and it's concentrating them. So you're going to find out a lot more about your line and what's within the line. Which animals can you breed with line breeding? So you're going to be able to breed father to daughter, mother to son, uncle to niece, aunt to nephew, and cousins. So that includes grandparents and everything. You just really want to stay away from brother, sister, because a lot of times brother and sister can be too closely related and you'll have some issues pop up a lot sooner versus going the other route. Line breeding can be really beneficial to get consistent type and furthers expression of your genetics. It needs to be a controlled breeding though, and you need to pay attention to what you're doing. And whenever you're getting birds hatched out, If you're noticing things going wrong, like a weak tail, some deformities of any sort, you need to cut that breeding out and probably cull the offspring and restart. So if you're not someone who wants to cull birds, I wouldn't recommend going into line breeding because you're going to need to do that to be a responsible breeder. Infertility is something to watch out for when you're line breeding. If you have infertile eggs and you're line breeding, probably switch up the pairing because they might be too closely related. Poor health. If you're getting poor health consistently in a line, you might want to switch up that breeding and probably cull those birds so you're not passing that on. Live breeding can be very beneficial, but it can also be dangerous if you don't do it right. But there is a lot to gain from line breeding. It can express your type better. You can concentrate the direction you're going into. Do we have any questions on line breeding? Okay, Nationals is in November, I think. I've always heard it's line breeding if it works, inbreeding if it doesn't. It's a good way to concentrate probability of traits, good and bad. Yes, that is true. So you can concentrate bad traits if you don't stay on top of it. If you breed two negative things in the same line, chances are you're going to get a lot of negative in those offspring. Even if they don't express it, they're going to be carrying it. Cull can also just mean removed from breeding programs. Selling as pets can be culling. Yes, that's true. You don't have to end the bird's life to cull them. Whatever you want to do to not continue breeding that bird, but you should be responsible and understand that if there's a reason to cull the bird, then it's for the benefit of the breed, and you should be responsible with your decision however you choose to remove them from breeding. What about half brother and sister, same root, different hens? They're still sharing the same dad. I know a lot of people breed brother and sister with chickens. They'll even breed full brother and sister. I've done it once, and I was satisfied with the type and the color and everything, but I noticed that the line was not as hardy. They were more prone to health issues, so I ended up not continuing that. You could try outcrossing a bird. If you end up in that situation, you still want to use the bird, you can try outcrossing it completely and seeing what you get, and maybe keep the offspring, but not keep that same bird breeding back into that line. But it's just something you need to figure out what works and be responsible. But issues breeding too close, chicks just didn't thrive. Yes, I've noticed whenever lines get concentrated, even if you're breeding responsibly line breeding, you can get to the point where your birds are just going to stop thriving because they're a little too closely related genetic wise. And I think it's always good to do different strands of the same line. So say if I'm focusing on one half of a line, I'm going to focus on the same line but in a different way, maybe outcrossed separate breeding. So I'm not going to just breed all of my birds together and make them all one line. I'm going to concentrate one line here, concentrate one line here, and then if I need to outcross, I'm outcrossing these two concentrated, these two concentrated lines, bringing them together, and then it's not as much of an outcross because they still have some similar genetics, and I'm probably still going to get consistent birds, and it's not as risky. So do we have any more questions on line breeding? If we don't, I'll move on. Okay, so now we're going to jump to selecting the right breeders, which I kind of covered that a little bit initially. But so to start with, when you're selecting for the right breeders, I think you really need to be familiar with the standard and know what you're breeding for. So you need to be familiar with the standard that you're breeding for, because that's your goal. That's where you're trying to end up. And you need to be familiar with that before you start trying to even select your breeders, because your initial selections can affect what happens in the long run. So it's important to pay attention to what you're supposed to even be breeding for. You can find our standards for SCNA at scnaonline.org in the standards section. our standards are traditional American, IM, silkied, and frizzled. So, you know, familiarize yourself with what you're wanting to get to and compare your birds to the standard. And when you're getting birds that are looking like the standard, you're going to want to breed those birds together. And if you don't have birds that look like the standard, you can try to create birds that look like the standard through selective breeding. So start with the best you can. Try not to breed anything twice. So it can mean a lot of things, but I'll explain what I mean by it. And I kind of touched on this with line breeding, but don't breed two bad traits and expect good odds of getting improvement. So say you have two poor quality birds in the sense of two really long backs and a male and a female. Don't expect to breed those two birds and get a bunch of short-backed offspring. It's just really likely not going to happen. If you've got a short-backed bird and you breed it to a long-backed bird, you might still get some long-backed birds, but there's a chance that you might get a little bit of a shorter back and you're going to bring improvement. So don't breed two bad traits and expect to get good odds, and then call as you make that improvement. So once you improve something, don't breed back to that negative trait. So say if you do just using for example, long back to short back, and you get some better back length birds, don't go and breed those improved birds back to something not as good. Try to keep improving and breed those birds to better birds. Do we have any questions? That was a little specific, but maybe y'all have questions in a different direction.
Hey, sorry we're a little late to join the meeting, but we're new to Seramas, and my question I have is kind of silly, but what size table, or what's the height for the table that we need to start training our chicks on?
We all pretty much use the same size tables for showing and for training. We both forgot the measurement, so Linda's just gonna bust out the measuring tape. 39 in height, and it's 32. It's about 32 circumference right here. So this is the height that the birds will be judged at. It's a little below eye level. They can be handled easily. So what was it, 39? Yeah, 39 by 32 is the height. You can find them on Amazon, eBay, Facebook. Jen commented it right there. 32 round by 40 to 42 high. Yep. So that's the tables that we use for showing with SCNA. What causes weak tail? Genetic nutrition, should they be called like rye tails? So a weak tail, it will arise with Serama usually. Serama are very small birds and they have huge tails. It's just not really proportionate. So I think it will rise up even if you're careful with breeding. In my experience, I would say that a weak tail can be subjective to different variants, but for the most part, if it's a weak tail, it's a weak tail genetically, meaning that their muscles just are not growing as fast as their tail feathers are growing. And even if it's just a short amount of time, the bird's going to have a weak tail. In the long run, you really want to breed birds that are never going to have that issue. And, you know, if you've got fully related birds and one sitting there with a proper tail, and it's got the same genetics, it's been fed and watered and raised the same exact way, and then its brother is sitting there with a weak tail, you know that something's different in that brother's genetics that's causing that. Now take that for what you want. That's just my opinion. Ideally, you shouldn't breed it. You can, and you can get better results in the offspring if you're careful, but you're not going to want to select that bird as your main breeder. You know, if you want to breed it on the side and see if you can improve it, and if you do, you know, keep the better offspring and do away with the parent that did it. But the only reason is ideally your tail should not be leaning any which way when you're showing. So you want to breed birds that are going to support an upright tail. just for an example, I had a nice type bird with a tail that tended to lean to the side. When I got out of Serama, I gave it to Linder. He bred it. He got birds with upright tails. I still have some running on the yard from the bird with perfect upright tails. Um, but ideally, no, you're not going to want to breed birds like that, really, no matter the cause at all. Nutrition can affect it. And I've seen something happens and a bird just lacks in nutrition, they will get a weak tail. And for the most part, I've never seen it improve once it happens. Which is hatching and raising. I'll answer the first question. Incubation versus brooding with a hen. I haven't had too much luck with an incubator. So I'll just read this description and then come back. Your temperature for hatching should be 99 to 100 degrees, and humidity should be 40 to 45%. In my opinion, an incubator is the safest way to go because your hens, unless you've got a proven hen that's a great mom, they're not you're not gonna know if the hen's gonna eat the eggs, if the hen's gonna get up and jump and step on the eggs, if the hen's gonna get off the nest for 2 days and then get back on. There's a lot of things that can happen with a hen, but if a hen sits on the eggs properly, sits on them the full term, you're usually going to get about every egg that she sits on the hatch. It's just if you want to take that risk. So, I guess that answers the question. There are a lot of factors though with incubating. I see you said you haven't had much luck with an incubator. There's a lot of factors with incubating that can make Serama eggs harder to hatch because they're smaller, they're more fragile, and more prone to environmental factors. Drafts, climate, location, different variants like quick change of temperature. If they're in a room, I've seen some people say that they keep them in their bathroom and then you take a shower and that room's really hot and humid. That's going to have an effect. So one thing that I found that made my Serama really hard to hatch was getting the humidity where it needed to be. I'd have birds that would fully develop and they wouldn't hatch. They'd make it all the way to the end and then they wouldn't hatch. And from my experience, it was always humidity. So I tried to find the humidity percentage that worked just right for me. And I live in Louisiana. We're really humid. So sometimes throughout the year, when I had my incubator outside of my chicken location, I would not add any water from start to finish, and I'd get really great hatch rates. When I'd move my incubator inside, I'd still do about a 40 to 45% humidity the whole way, and I would not raise it at all. That can be hard to achieve though, that specific of a humidity. So I'd recommend investing in an incubator that you can do that with, with automatic humidity. You can even buy or create an automatic humidity system with any incubator, I guess. But for me, humidity has always been the biggest issue with incubating. What incubator do you recommend? I think that depends on what you're trying to spend, how many eggs you're trying to hatch, and really what you're looking for. Not concerning cost, I would recommend Brenza incubators. Arcom incubators are really good incubators. I really like Brenza. They're really reliable. Arcom would be my second choice. So I would recommend just looking up both of those brands and seeing what fits exactly what you want. If you don't need to hatch a lot of eggs, you can get a smaller incubator from Brenza. It'll be a little expensive, but you're going to hatch every egg that you put in the incubator, and that's kind of what you want. You don't want to waste time and money not getting the eggs to hatch if you're spending time and money to put into the birds. I have a question, so I'll pause. And how long does it take for the bird to fully develop? Like, what age should you evaluate a Serama for your program? You can start seeing potential in a bird from a week old. You can start seeing a bird develop at a week old all the way up to 18 months old. That could change and develop in different ways. Now, what age should you evaluate your Serama? I think that depends on your line and knowing your line. because a bird can start off looking great, and then when it reaches 2 years old, be a pound and a half, or be a huge bird, or be a bird that developed a longer back or didn't develop a chest. So I think if you know your line, you can go younger and younger based on how much you know your line. But when you're just starting out, you should probably let those birds finish out to at least a year old before you decide if you're going to keep them or not, because they can really change a lot. So again, with hatching, just trial and error. Take people's recommendations, but also do what works for you. Try different things. If you're not getting good hatches, try everything you can with the incubator. Test the temperature, buy a thermometer to put in there. Just trial and error. Do what you can do. If not, buy a new incubator. Just see what works for you. So I have artificial insemination as the next topic. What is artificial insemination? That's taking the semen from the male and putting it into the female. It's you can find videos on YouTube that show how to do it. It's very simple once you practice and get used to it. If it's something that you're comfortable with doing, the way I would do it, whenever I artificially inseminated my birds, I would take I would take the male, and just place it on a spoon and then put it right onto the female. Worked good for me. Beneficial because sometimes you'll have a really nice bird that isn't the best breeder. You're not getting fertile eggs, and you really want to use that bird. It's beneficial because you're going to be able to get babies from the bird. It's a good way to find out if the male's infertile or if the female's infertile, or different things. It's a great way to use that one bird over several different females and not have to have them all in one big cage if you don't have that room. Um, when I did it, I would say at least once a week, preferably 2 times a week, to keep the birds fertile. And that's the last topic that I have. If y'all have any questions about that, or if y'all want to go back to anything else, or if y'all have a completely different question or for something that I didn't cover. What exactly is Squirrel Tail? So Squirrel Tail, I guess let's get a bird just to show that. Linda didn't have any examples of Squirrel Tail, which is a good thing. So I'll just take this bird and show. Maybe I can put it a little closer. So we have some diagrams also on SCNA website, I guess, that would show what Squirrel Tail is. So this bird, his sickles are kind of curved a little bit, which I guess actually helps with showing this. He's not squirrel tailed, but from the base of his tail, the direction, you can see this pin is held at 90 degrees. The base of his tail is in alignment with this, and as it comes up, that line's not crossed. Now, if the base of his tail went from here to here, or in any direction, if it crosses that vertical line, then it's considered squirrel tail. So you don't want to breed that. That is genetic. It's tapping into some genetics of what the Serama were made up of. Japanese ban them. You don't want to breed that. That's genetic. It's going to stick around. So again, it's just the line from where the tail starts to where it goes up. And if the tail crosses that line and comes forward, it's squirrel tail. So say if it was like this right now, that's crossing that line, naturally this bird isn't squirrel tail. How important is body type on tabletop? Extremely important. The whole purpose of putting a bird on the table is to be evaluated according to the standard. So it's extremely important for a bird to have good body type on the table. Performance is considered. It's awesome, but any chicken can flap and any chicken can crow. So that's something that I always say. And when I'm explaining it to people, I've had people say my bird flapped, it crowed, did all the stuff it needed to do performance wise. Why didn't it do good on the table? How does your bird compare to the written standard? If it's not fitting the standard, then the performance really doesn't mean much. Performance can help a good bird compete, definitely, but it's not gonna bring a bird above a better typed bird, or at least it shouldn't. Hope that answers that question. The percentage, though, I believe on the initial scorecard is 75% according to the appearance, type, everything of the bird, and then 25% of performance. What housing recommendations do you have for Serama? I'd like to move this computer to show that, so let's see if we have any other questions before I do that. When you don't do AI, do you keep pairs or trios for breeding? AI is something that I like to do just because I don't like wasting time and money. So if I've got a pair together, even if they're breeding, if they were a pair that I really wanted birds out of, I was AI. Because if the hen's only going to lay 7 eggs, I want to hatch every one of them so I can get the best bird out of that. I'm not going to leave it up to the birds just because nature doesn't always do what we want it to do. I kept my birds in. I really didn't do pairs. I'm not breeding right now. I didn't really do pairs unless I was just doing some test breedings. If I had a really good male and I was using him for, say, my black Serama program, I would keep that male over 6 or so hens. And usually, not every hen's going to be laying at the exact same time. So a hen that's laying is usually going to be receptive to breeding. So the male is usually going to breed every single one of those females when they need to be bred. I'd say 4 to 6, and if you go over that, maybe he won't be able to keep up, but maybe he will. I guess that also depends on the male. Could you briefly demonstrate training the bird for proper posing and performance? So, just going back to what I touched on in the beginning of the video, I'm not sure if you were on here for that, Tyler, but I explained that a little bit more at the beginning of the video. You can't necessarily train a bird to pose properly. You could maybe enhance performance and maybe enhance uprightness, but it really should be genetic. The main thing that you're going to do to train your bird is just get them comfortable on the table, and everything else should be genetic and natural for that bird. You can go back to the beginning of the video to watch everything that I mentioned just to get them comfortable on the table. Are you going to talk about getting your bird into a good condition? Good question. I intended to talk about that, but I didn't. I think for in-cage, condition is extremely important. That's kind of like your performance for tabletop. For in-cage, condition is extremely important for in-cage. It's also important for tabletop, but I'd say it's more emphasized in-cage. They really want to see a bird in great condition because they're really evaluating feather, color, and they want to be able to see that. So getting your bird into a good condition would be maintaining a very healthy bird, feeding, watering regularly, keeping the bedding clean. Some people will use different beddings to keep the poop from sticking to the bird's wings or to their feet. So I guess you could do your research on that and just see what works best for people. I like wire to keep the birds clean, but then at the same time, sometimes wire can affect the wingtips of the bird, so it's doing the opposite. Sand works really well because it takes all the moisture out, and usually you'll have dirty feet with sand, but you can clean the feet a lot easier than you can clean a white feather. Is the wire hard on their feet? I have not found it to be hard on their feet. I would definitely recommend having somewhere that they could step off of the wire in their cage, though, if you do have wire. Some people will even put softer padding on top of the wire for them to step off of. But I don't think that they're heavy enough birds for the wire to really affect their feet. If anything, it's keeping them in a cleaner environment. That's my opinion. What percentage of protein in the feed do you recommend for Seramas? I'm not well versed on that enough to really go into depth, but I've found that keeping them on a higher protein has been better for me because they are really fast growing birds. So feeding them something like a game bird food is good because like quail, pheasants, they're all really fast growing birds. Bigger chickens are going to grow smaller than these little Seramas. So I think a high amount of protein is good at the beginning. I do think though, for adult birds, their combs can get bigger if they're on a lot of protein. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I maybe just do your research and ask other Serama folks. I know that we have some people in SCNA that are well versed in that. The Luptons, Charlotte and Frank Lupton, Becky Schultz. I know that they're familiar with that. I wouldn't want to give wrong information on that. So, are there any other questions? We do have an article on the website for feeding. It's just called Feeding. So y'all can go to the SCNA website and read that article. I'm sure you can find a lot more online also that goes into detail about that. One thing I will say on that topic though is calcium. Calcium is really important to watch with your Serama. The females need it to produce eggs, but the males don't lay eggs, and they're really tiny birds. So giving them a lot of calcium can definitely do damage to your males long term because they don't have any way to deposit that calcium. It's just all being processed in their body, and they don't need that amount of calcium. So that is one thing that I picked up on and talked to a few other people about with Serama is making sure that your males don't have too high of a calcium in their diet. So making calcium optional versus putting it in the food would be the better option. They do like it though, and they do need it. Chrissy's including some links in the description. In the chat. What feeders do you recommend? Mine just empty the feeder out into the bedding and waste. Do you have those the gray ones, or what do you have? I think we'll just move into here because I wanted to talk about cages as well. Someone asked a question. So it might get a little loud, but this is an amazing setup for Serama. So I'll just show. He's got individual pens. Linda does mostly pair breeding, right? You do mostly pairs. So he's able to keep a lot of birds in a small space by the cage style that he uses. I think, let me see exactly what the question said. Okay, so some recommendations you have for your Serama? I know that not everybody's able to do a room like this based on where they live. If you don't have the ability to do that, but if you do, this is an extremely awesome Serama house with cages built to fit a lot of birds. They've got room in the cages. This is the feeders that I was actually going to recommend, so I'll show that. You can find these on Siegel's Pigeon. I think that's the name of it. So it holds the feed in the bottom. Linda has it lifted up so that they don't scratch the bedding into it, which is good. They can't spill these. They can scratch bedding into it, though, and kind of hide the food. So I'd recommend if you use them just to elevate them somehow. These waterers are great also. Keeps the water clean. Very easy to change. They're not going to scratch stuff into their water. Clean water is very important. Jen put a link for feeders. Awesome. Oh, they're awesome. We also have an article about incubation. Several of our breeders contributed their methods too. I think I also have an article or two on the website. So these are the pens that he has. I'll show his single male pens, which I like. Same basic style, just a bit smaller. They don't really need that much room. He also takes his birds out and puts them on the yard in some cages to give them a little bit more space. This is his little brooder house that he has built and set up, which is really cool. It opens up. is a way to keep the heat in the pins and easy cleanup. You can just pull those out. But as far as what housing would I recommend for Serama, I'd just say something that can keep them clean, happy, and healthy. It doesn't need to be huge. They are small birds. Shouldn't be too small either, though. I kept my Serama out on ground pins, just like normal chickens. I think it's important to be able to get natural nutrients. If they're confined to a pen, they're not always going to get that. They need sunlight. They need minerals, vitamins. So putting them out on the yard like Linda does, like I've done, is good for birds that are kept in their pens. Okay, do y'all have any more questions? These are some ground pens. I'll show y'all those. Sure that you can see them. Yeah. Do they hook up? He's gonna hook the lights up for us. But so yeah, I guess smaller pens like the setup up here would be great for confined breeding, refined breeding, and then these larger pens, which you can somewhat see, are good for breeding, one male over several females. Here, this one lit up on this side. Let's see this. So see, he's got some birds on a roost right there. He's got nest boxes, feeder. So yeah, that's another option of pen styles. What is he using to keep the dust down? He has a shop vac right here. And I guess that's a good way to keep the dust down. Ventilation is good. He has on both sides of the wall, it's open with wire, so he's got good ventilation. That's really important to keep the dust down. Bedding is also something to consider if you're having a lot of dust. I'd say just maintaining clean cages and cleaning them out and having good ventilation will help with dust. Okay, do we have any more questions?
Which incubator do you recommend?
Okay, specific recommendation, let me find it and see online so I can say the right name. So the Brenza Ovation 56X is a really good incubator. I basically with this incubator had hen style hatching in an incubator, so that means that basically every egg that was fertile was going to hatch. Now you will have, weak embryos for whatever reason. You're not always going to get every bird to hatch, but basically if they started, they finished in this incubator. This is a picture of it. Ovation 56X. It's very expensive in my opinion. Another incubator that's a lot more price friendly, you can find them at Tractor Supply. I forgot the name of it, so I'm going to Google it. I told you about it. They have those too, but it's this one right here. Let's see the name. It's called the Nurture Right 360 from Tractor Supply. That's what this one looks like. This incubator was extremely awesome. It worked well for me. I use it as a hatcher. You can control the humidity not as well because it's a cheaper incubator, but they have the option on the outside to add water, so you don't have to open the incubator. I really love this incubator. I got 90 to 95% hatches every single time I hatched in this incubator. So that would be my opinion on my recommendations. All right, any more questions? I'm not running y'all off. If y'all want to ask a question, go ahead. Chrissy, I'm not doing a live demonstration on collecting AI. I'd probably scare a lot of people off.
I got the utensils even if you want.
Linda said he has the utensils. We'll give y'all a few minutes to clear out if y'all don't want to see it. I'm just joking. I think I'd do a separate video just on that so people knew what they were getting themselves into. Let's see. We might have a question here. Nope. Okay, well, I think that's about to be a wrap if we don't have any more questions. Got a good example of a blue there. He does in one of the pins. Do you mind me grabbing one of those hens that's asleep?
No,
That back. Okay, so this is a blue female. She's got, let me just look at her for a second. Yeah. I think this one's a little bit better. Her legs are better though, so I'll show them both. So for blues, you want an even tone across the whole bird, meaning that it's not splotchy, it's not darker here, lighter here, or ombre or anything like that. You want to have an even color on the bird. This is a really awesome example of a blue. Every feather should be laced on the blue Serama. Their wing feathers, their tail feathers should be evenly laced, and usually their hackles will be darker. So I'll try to show this up close. I'm not sure if it'll focus, but you can see that her lacing is even. She's even toned across the whole body. She's got nice red lobes. And he just took the other hen back. But if we can show this. See, she's got yellow padding on the bottom, dark on top. See a side view. I'm not sure if it shows it. This is a really good example of a blue American Serama. Chrissy says that they did color videos with an ABA judge recently. Not sure where you can find those, but they have them. What do you use for travel boxes? See those right up there? Those are awesome. Linda makes them. He also sells them. Not sure if he ships them. Do you ship them?
Oh, I can.
He can ship them. They're really nice. I've used them. They're great to bring a lot of birds to a show without having a ton of different containers to carry when you're bringing them into the show. I mean, I could fit, that's 6 across. I could fit 12 or more birds in one of those boxes, and I could fit 4 of those. I have a Jeep and my seats lay down, so those are really good for bringing a lot of birds to a show and not taking up so much space. So you can kind of, not to say that this is a bad bird, she's not bad, but I just want to show the difference. I'm not sure if I really can, if it shows up well, but you can see the lacing difference. This one's a bit more splotchy, this one's more evenly laced. I'm not sure if it really shows up, but both good birds. Her lacing's just, you see how you can see her lacing a lot better. She's more defined. Yeah, and see, she's even. She's same tone. This one's a little lighter as you get back. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if we miss any questions. Travel boxes. Someone says they would be interested in AI. I may have to do that one day. I might have to come to Linda's house though, because I don't have any more Serama. What are the known colors for Seramas? I have a couple crazy colored. Serama comes any color. Any color you can find on a chicken, you can breed it in a Serama. How do we contact him to purchase travel boxes? What would you want to give him? Your number?
It's called
Or Facebook?
Cajun Seramas?
Yeah. So you can find his Facebook page, L&J's Cajun Seramas on Facebook, and you can message him there. I bought several from him. They're really good. They're hardy. Very easy to use. The top actually slides back so you can open it up. Really awesome. Lightweight too. They're not super heavy. He uses thin wood for it. Chrissy says you can get any color Serama. Yes, you can.
That's the problem. You get too many colors.
I know. I'd say my favorite colors for Serama would probably be Wheaton. I really love blacks and whites. I love blue and splash. I probably love it. Okay, any more questions? Y'all keep giving more every time I ask, so don't let me down. Might be a while before I'm able to do another one of these. No question's a stupid question. Sarah, I know you have a question up in there. Purchase travel boxes, L&J Seramas. I'll comment it on here, just in case y'all can't understand me. Okay. Sarah does not have a question. How do we bathe Seramas for a show? I'll try to describe that briefly. I would just wash them with Dawn soap. You can use different soaps. Flea and Tick's good before you go to a show too, just to be sure you're not bringing anything to a show. Sometimes you don't have to wash your Serama if you keep them conditioned well. I would just wash them with Dawn dish soap and warm water. Let them sit with the soap, scrub it off with just my hands. That worked well for me. And then I dip them in a vinegar water, which takes the soap off and helps with drying. And ideally, I'd like to just let them sit on the yard in pens and dry in the sun. If not, you can blow dry them. If you're bathing them for a show, do it at least a week before a show, because their feathers are going to get flat, and it'll kind of make their type not look as good if they have flat feathers. What shampoo should you use? I just use Dawn, and I think Adam's Flea and Tick. They also have ones for white Serama, blue, and shampoos, which are good. Chrissy says we have an article for that on the website. Great. He uses baby shampoo. Vinegar to water 50-50? No, I just use a 5-gallon bucket with a splash of vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is what I would use. Okay, any more questions? If not, we'll wrap it up. Okay, thank y'all. Miss you too, Miss Angel. Hopefully you can come out to the Cajun Classic in June of next year. Is the date for that one, and this one, oh no, this one's June. Next one will be April 21st.
Yeah.
So this Cajun Classic will be June 3rd to 4th, and then next Cajun Classic next year would be April 21st and 22nd.
21st, 22nd, and 23rd.
Okay.
23.
All right. Thank y'all. Hope this helped. Hope y'all could hear me good throughout the whole thing. All right. Guess we'll try to end this. I hope there's not a wrong way to end it and lose the recording.